Welcome to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. The Pharmacy Leaders Podcast is a member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network, with interviews and advice on building your professional network, brand, and a purposeful second income from students, residents, and innovative professionals.
Hey, welcome to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast. You may have heard the Income Outcomes Show, where they go over some techniques and tips for goals for 2018, and I know they have a number of educational videos on waypointus.com that can help you if you're an independent pharmacy owner, whether it's life after or you're trying to sell the pharmacy. But what I wanted to bring back today was Tim Baker from Script Financial, who kind of gives an overview of really what it is to be a financial planner. His road is really interesting, going from the military academy to financial planning and service, and how this has brought so much fulfillment to his life. And he does a really good job of kind of explaining finances and how to talk to a financial planner. After this episode, we're going to have a two-part series with Tim Church, another member of the YourFinancialPharmacist team, who is going to go over a number of really recommendations as you're looking at residency, as you're looking at jobs, and seeing, well, what do I want to do in terms of, what do I want to pursue? Can I take the residency hit? It costs, X number of dollars in opportunity costs, and then you've got extra interest on some of your student loans possibly, and then how do you make that decision? And then in the second episode, we're going to go through his book. I'm an author, he's an author, and he was an author with Tim Ulbrich, and we're going to talk about the author's path and get some insights from that book, The Seven-Figure Pharmacist. So I'm looking forward to all three of these episodes, but here we are first with Tim Baker.
This is Tim Baker, founder of Script Financial, and you're listening to the Pharmacy Podcast.
Tim Baker is a certified financial planner and owner of Script Financial, a fee-only financial planning firm dedicated to helping pharmacists meet their financial goals. He's a graduate of the United States Military Academy, and after spending some time in the Army and in the private sector working as a logistician, he decided to pivot to the financial services industry because of his desire to work and help people one-on-one. He first worked for a small independent firm before working specifically with the pharmacy profession. Tim spends much of his time reading and listening to shows about pharmacy, like the Pharmacy Podcast, to better understand the profession, to provide the highest quality service to his clients. Tim's based in Baltimore, but works with clients nationwide. Tim, welcome to the Pharmacy Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Tony. I appreciate it.
Well, I always start with the same question, but then we'll veer off to some other paths. Everyone's leadership road is different, and certainly as a graduate of the Military Academy, you are one of the top leaders. Let's start with where you are today and how you became a leader in helping pharmacists with their financial futures.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I am a certified financial planner, and I work exclusively with pharmacists and their financial needs. And it really kind of happened by accident. After I got out of the Army, I took a job in the Midwest as a logistician, like you said, and bounced from there to a job in Southern California doing the same type of thing with a construction company. And I kind of went through my quarter life crisis and, tried to figure out really what I wanted to do career-wise. And I knew I wanted to come back to the East Coast. So I narrowed it down to a few professions and found that small independent firm in Baltimore, and quickly realized that I did want to work with the younger demographic of people, and kind of by accident fell into the pharmacy niche, and it's been one of the best career moves I've ever made.
That's fantastic. I'm so excited to be talking to Baltimore. I'm in Iowa. I love Iowa, but I lived in Baltimore from 93 to 97 for pharmacy school, and then I went back in 2001 to 2008. So I saw two very different real estate markets. One of the first financial goals many people have is buying a house. And you said, I think you're in the market for a new home. What's your process for evaluating homes and how it fits into your financial future?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think, buying a house they say it's going to be the biggest, purchase that you make in your life. And I really think it's a matter of, dissecting what that goal is, whether it's, is this your starter home? You just want to get your foot in the market, or, do you view this as, an investment stream later? So kind of, talking through that with, your partner or with your professional network to see really what you're looking to get out of it. But then, it kind of comes down to the dollars and cents and what you can really afford. So one of the things that I advise clients of is you really want to avoid being house rich and cash poor, because so many people kind of go into this and their eyes get big when they see what a lender might approve them for. And, it's really, in their best interest to give you a loan that is as high as that they think you can afford because of the interest that they collect on that. But, kind of breaking down the math and, accounting for what you would have to pay back for a loan that is, X amount of principal and X amount of interest rate, and then also consider the tax and the insurance there. So what I say is, obviously I'm a big proponent of working with a professional, but build your team, whether that's your financial planner, a real estate agent, a loan officer, and kind of, break it down in terms of what you can afford and then what's also important to you. So, for us, we're buying a house in the Locust Point neighborhood of Baltimore, and it's the school is decent there, and we just enjoy that part of it. So, and then you have to also consider the external factors. So, interest rates. Right now we're in a rising interest rate environment, and for particular markets, you might have markets that are overheated. So you might have to come out of pocket to just get the deal done. So, and that varies from city to city. So, a big decision, obviously. So, obviously you're going to want to get some help and bounce those ideas off of somebody else.
Yeah, I found that it's really important to get referrals. It's so easy to, look online, do your research there, get connected with maybe the realtor that's selling the house or something like that. But really, it's a matter of getting good referrals to good people. I know I still have relationships with some of the people that I worked with. I worked as a realtor back there in Baltimore in 01 to about 06. And really it was getting good referrals, getting good people in there that we could refer them to so that we could build this team. And we made sure not only did we get them a good deal, but we protected them. And not just with the house, we protect them from anything going wrong a little bit later, but it sounds like that's a little bit about what you do with financial planning. There's a bit of an aggressive side with, okay, what goals do we want to reach, but also how do we protect that we have? So that kind of segues into my next question, which is, we talked earlier about life events, and those tend to be a good time to sit down and find a financial professional. Things like graduation or marriage, having a kid, or you talked about planning for a home. We didn't realize that we would, as getting triplets, that we would fill a 4-bedroom house all at once. So that, I don't know how that ended up working out. And then can you help me better understand the process someone goes through to evaluate a financial planner, so they could look online and say, okay, here's all these CFPs. They've all got certification, but before I give someone my financial information, I kind of want to know them. I want to trust them. How do you handle that part of the interview aspect that a prospective client might have?
I think it's a great question, and I encourage prospective clients to make sure that they are doing their due diligence. I feel like even when I buy a microwave, I'm talking to
a microwave. All right,
2 or 3 different salesmen to make sure I'm getting the best deal. So obviously, it's something as important as a financial planner. You're going to want to make sure that you are doing your due diligence and shopping around, and make sure that you find someone that you fit with. So. Actually, on my website, you have scriptfinancial.com/services. I have a section there of questions to ask your financial advisor. So a few of those include, what qualifies you? How do you get paid? Are you a fiduciary, which is basically, are you going to act in my best interests? And, for me, when I go to hire a professional, or when I check someone out, I Google them, I think as most people do. And before I even get into what the business does, I go to the about section and I want to learn, kind of about them and what makes them tick, and if I think that I would connect with them. So that's kind of what I definitely encourage prospective clients to do. And there's a lot of good networks out there that I provide. I'm a member of a few of them, whether that's the XY Planning Network, FPA, the Fee Only Network, NAPFA. And you can find these on my website as well to really, get in there and do your search. And then the other thing that I would say to do is kind of do an objective search of a firm's Form ADV. And what this form does is it's a plain English document that contains information like services offer, their fee schedule, how they get paid, and then if there's any disciplinary information or conflict of interest out there that you should be aware of. And you can find these forms on advisorinfo.sec.gov. And then finally, I would say, you got to go by feel a little bit, because finance is a very personal thing. So, when you're talking to somebody, just trust your gut. And if you feel like, you really connect with this person, then, maybe it's time to make the decision and go with that. So it's a very important decision. And I think something that, you're going to want to do your research, but there are, avenues out there that you can explore to kind of get a better sense of the advisor even before you meet with him, he or she.
Okay, well, I think one of the reasons people don't go to a professional is the fear of judgment. You mentioned some things in your background that I felt made you very approachable, your military service, your focus on pharmacy community. Although we're 50, 100,000, however, maybe 300,000 strong across the country, we're still a smallish group compared to maybe nurses who maybe have 3.1 million across the country. And you seem very empathetic to the student loan debt and challenges these new graduates have. How do you ease a pharmacist's concerns, help them kind of win the week or win the month, rather than saying, okay, well, I'm a failure until I pay off my student loans, until I pay off my house? How do you get these incremental steps?
Yeah, it's a great question, Tony. I would say that, like you mentioned, like my experience in the Army and even in the private sector, I was not always a model citizen when it came to finances. When I was in high school, I did a good job of saving for my car and paying my insurance and all that kind of stuff. But then I think when I got into the military, it was kind of a, YOLO, you only live once, when I
understand.
I would do the party up and really spend freely. So I was a spendthrift. And then I felt like, I was in careers where I felt like I didn't necessarily fit. And I kind of use spending to ease that, maybe that anxiety or whatever. So I can empathize. My first job out of the Army was with Sears Holdings, and I was making pretty good money, and I was signing up for my 401k, and I got to, where I needed to allocate it, and it said, small cap value fund, large cap growth fund. I really didn't know what those things were. So, I went out and I went on Amazon and I bought Investing for Dummies, and on my shelf, and I think it's funny today, but yeah. I got that book and I flipped through the first few pages and I'm like, you know what, I'm going to pick the highest returns. And at 25 or whatever I was, that was okay. But, I feel like you really can't, fly by the seat of your pants when it comes to your finances. But I've been there, done that. And, I've been in a situation where I've made a lot of money and I didn't really had a lot to show for it. So it's the whole idea of, wealth is not what you make, it's what you keep. And then same thing, when I bought my first home, you kind of, you feel like you're signing your life away. I feel like I went in there maybe not prepared for, what I was actually doing. So, they say money is the last great taboo. And really when you work with a financial planner, you're in theory, you're undressing financially in front of someone. So that can be stressful and embarrassing. But, just like you would go to get a physical and undress, the doctor has seen it all and can really, help you and put their thumb on what the actual issue is. And I say for young people too, is people that come to me have recognized the idea that they need some assistance and that, they recognize the need for some long-term planning. So that's half the battle. And with young people in particular, they have time, and time is the greatest asset of any financial plan. And as an analogy, at my last firm, we would have, people that would come in at, age 45 or 50, and they say, okay, I want to start, saving for retirement. And it's a lot harder to do that than it is at, 25 and 30. So again, those are kind of the things that I would say to kind of ease the mind of a young pharmacist is, hey, we got this. Let's put the plan in place, and we'll get you to where you need to go. So that's pretty much how I approach it.
No, that sounds great. You talked about something that I maybe understand vaguely, but you talked about the fiduciary standard of care, and you had a good analogy about a suit and fit and how it looked, and that there's a professional for everyone. Can you tell me a little bit more about what that means? I don't really know what fiduciary standard of care, that doesn't translate well for me. I don't really know what that means.
Yeah, and it's funny because I've had a lot of prospects come in and cite last week tonight by John Oliver. He did an episode on this maybe last season or whatever that talks about the financial services industry and what this whole idea of fiduciary is. And basically, in essence, a fiduciary is someone who, owes another party the duties of good faith and trust. And basically that means that they are bound ethically to act in another's best interest. And for the most part, a lot of financial professionals are not held to that standard. They follow what's called a suitability standard of care. So you have the fiduciary standard of care and the suitability standard of care. And basically the way that I explain this is, if I'm selling you a suit and, I'm following the suitability standard of care, basically all I need to do is make sure that suit fits. So we do your measurements and, you put the suit on, and, it could be a suit that is bright, yellow with blue polka dots. It really doesn't look that good. In the fiduciary standard of care, not only do I have to make sure that suit fits, I have to make sure it looks damn good. So it's really in your best interest that suit fits and looks good on you. And to me, that's the subtle difference. But there's a lot of financial professionals out there that aren't bound by that, that ethical standard to act in your best interest. And that's something that you should definitely be aware of. And that's something that should be part of your repertoire in terms of questioning when you hire a financial professional. It's very important.
No, I appreciate that. I think I understand it a little better now. It seems that you're meeting people where they are financially. When we talked earlier, that is, if someone's maybe has high income, high debt versus middle income, maybe less debt or something like that. Tell me a little bit about how you meet them in their financial place. You talked about how there are these modules and they fit what the person's current situation is. So I'm married with 3 children versus somebody who I just graduated, I'm free to move about the country, and I've just got my first job.
Yeah, so I'm a big proponent of really specializing or designing my services to what the young pharmacist is actually looking for. So, and I've done a lot of research and talked to a lot of pharmacists over cups of coffee and the residents and students, and just try to get a feel of what's going on. So, like you said, I have a lot of prospective clients that say, hey, Tim, I have, $150,000 worth of student debt. I'm making, $125,000. I really need help with my student loan debt and maybe setting up my retirement allocation and saving for a home, or I want to have a child. So basically, what we do is we meet, we get all of the clients' accounts into their client portal. I call it the Legend portal, and it's basically a snapshot of where they're at in that moment of time, and it gives them a budget that we go through. It gives them a dynamic net worth statement, or also known as a personal balance sheet, that shows them everything that they own, everything that they owe, and then kind of what they're worth, I guess, if you want to say. And then really my job is to with their goals in mind, develop a plan to fill their pits and fill their buckets. So a pit would be a student loan debt, a credit card debt, and then a bucket would be, hey, I just had a child, I want to set up a 529, or I want to establish my emergency fund, or I want to buy a home. And basically my job is to divert as much of their everyday income or of their income from their everyday checking account into these pits and into these buckets that we set up. So within a relatively short period of time, you can kind of turn around your financial situation just by kind of having someone you coach you through it and tell you what to do. So, and that's, to me, that's the big piece is, when I'm looking for prospective clients, I'm looking for someone who, is coachable and kind of wants to collaborate and do this together. And I think, being able to adjust my financial plan to address those needs, up front, so they feel like they're getting value, in the very beginning of the relationship is key to making sure that my clients are happy and stay with me for a long period of time.
Okay. You reminded me of a home inspection company, and I have to talk about them because they're up there in Baltimore. Bill and Tasha Bitts have Discover It Home Inspections, and Bill is so methodical, and I think he does a lot of what you do, and certainly the realtors help the clients. But when it comes to home inspection, that's a single day, half a day where the home inspector can teach you, educate you. And I remember Bill doing a great job of that. And then you get this electronic printout at the end, and then you can ask questions later. You were using technology as well, in kind of similarly to a home inspector, where you've gotten this set up, you have the information, you see their progress, but maybe they need more information on a piece of it that is unfamiliar. So for example, I would go with a home inspector, and I am not handy at all. You can ask my wife. I am not handy. If the water heater breaks, I'm calling a plumber. I'm not going down there to say, maybe I can get this. I got this, honey, because I'll be calling a plumber, and then whoever the disaster relief guy is. But I would go with this home inspector, and he would explain HVAC to me. And then he would explain plumbing to me. And then he would explain good materials versus bad materials. He would explain the deck is supported well because we have certain width that it's meeting, or these things maybe they cut corners on. So tell me a little bit about how you educate your clients with those things, like, I'm just going to throw terms out like Roth and those number acronyms for savings and things like that. How do you educate your clients using the technology?
Yeah, it's such a good analogy, Tony, and I do something very similar. So, you have your 6 components of a financial plan, that could be fundamentals or insurance or investments. And what I do, how I approach it and how I use technology is, outside of the client portal, which is kind of the basis of all our plan. And I go through, and a big part of what I do is education. So like you said, the difference between a Roth IRA and a traditional IRA, or, what a 401k is, or whatever the topic is. And I provide education, and what I do is I film my presentation, I record my presentation, and the presentation is educationally based, and then it is laced kind of with their recommendations. So at the end of it, I might say, so as an example, the fundamentals is what I start every client with. So we go through and we kind of go through a goals recap of what they're looking to get out of working with me. We go through their SWOT analysis, so their strengths, their weaknesses, some opportunities and threats. And then I launch into, the high cost of credit and why this is important to know, or, an emergency fund and where good places are to invest in that. And then at the end of it, I give them their recommendations. So it is educationally based, and then their targeted recommendations to their own financial situation. So I record that, and then I drop that recording into and it's they're following slides with me, so it's visual too. And I drop that MP4 into their vault, and then they view it on demand. And to me, just like I listen, I'm a big listener of the Pharmacy podcast show. I listen to that when I'm in the car or whatever. I listen to it at my own, on my own time. And then when the client basically completes, the listening, I have them fill out a survey that says, hey, what did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? And then what are the things that we need to talk to specifically with regard to the education piece or the recommendation? And to me, it really sets the agenda And I think it's more efficient way to, utilize not only my time, but the clients as well. So, I've had some really great feedback with that. And I would say lastly, I just went through our home inspection, and the same thing happened. The home inspector kind of went through and was teaching me all these things. And, I was taking notes like crazy on my Evernote, and, but I missed some things. So the way that I do it really kind of provides an archive of content that a client can go back and say, oh yeah, I remember Tim talking about this. Let me review that again. And it's been, I think it's been a win-win for my practice and my client base.
Okay, well, one more question about the financial planning, and then we'll get to some quick hit questions at the end. And I remember this distinctly, and it had to be like, I want to say 17 or 18 years ago. And I sat down with someone, and this wasn't a CFP, it wasn't a financial planner, it was a broker. I want to say it was at Fidelity or something like that. And I remember him saying, "You're a pharmacist, right? And well, here's a great biotechnology like money market account or something like that." I'm like, that has nothing to do with what I'm doing. And it was so clear that his pay was tied to him selling something that connected with me. And he missed that one altogether. But that's a real concern, I think, when it comes down to paying for these kinds of services, is that, well, I have confession here. I had $20,000 in credit card debt when I graduated from pharmacy school. So if I had gone to that guy, he still would have tried to sell me biotechnology that maybe even if it makes 8 or 9%, great. But I had this credit card debt at what was probably 18% or something like that. So how is it that your fee structure is set up to avoid that situation where you're not going to start pushing product on me? Because I think that would be something else someone would be scared of, is I don't want someone to push product. I want someone to have my best financial interest in mind.
Right, and it's also so important when you're vetting financial advisors. And I am what's called a fee-only financial planner, but I take it, and the reason I did that was really for conflict of interest, but I take it to another level, I think, with my pricing structure. I basically charge based on income and net worth or your personal balance sheet. And I wrote a long blog about why I do this, but essentially, I wanted to reduce conflict of interest, but I also wanted to align our interests. So obviously, the more money my clients make and the more that they're worth, the more that I potentially get paid. And I think we're very much aligned. So it is in my best interest to make sure that every financial decision or every financial recommendation that I make to a client, it's ultimately going to do those two things. To me, it is also best aligned with comprehensive financial planning. So a lot of the financial services industry is so heavily slanted towards investments, but a lot of young pharmacists, we don't have investments to manage. We're just starting out. So what's kind of led the industry to do is neglect this segment of the population. But if you think about all the important financial decisions that you make when you're young, buying a house, starting a family, setting the how much you should defer into your retirement or your allocation, and there's a lot that goes on. So my thing is I could get you a great hypothetical investment return of 12%, but then if you have credit card debt, and I sell you that product that you mentioned, if you have credit card debt of $40,000 or $20,000 and you're paying 29% on that, I'm not really helping your cause. I'm not really helping you look at the big picture. So to me, that that net worth number that that we track, and when you log into your client portal, it smacks you in the face every time, and it kind of we have a history tab. So when we start at time 0, we can kind of see how we've progressed over time. But to me, that's the real measure or the real value of working with a financial planner. And I like it too because it's tailored to the client and it meets their complexity. So someone who might make or be worth $3 million is going to be different than someone who makes or is worth $40,000. So it's proportional to the income, and then it kind of I kind of grow steadily with you. And I think in other pricing structures, it can be very spiky in that sense. So to me, the net worth number and calculating based on income has worked for me. And I think once I can explain it to prospective clients of why I do that, the light bulb goes on, and they say, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So that's kind of how I do it.
And it's predictable, which is fantastic. Well, let me ask you, how could someone contact you, or how do you prefer someone contact you, whether by email, Twitter, LinkedIn? What are the ways that you prefer people contact you?
Yeah, I would say either, email. My email is tim@scriptfinancial.com. And then I'm on, all the social media. So my Twitter handle is at Tim Baker 856. I'm on LinkedIn. There is another Tim Baker that's a fee only advisor out there. So I'll be the one that's connected to all the pharmacists. And then if you search if you search Script Financial on Facebook, I have a page out there as well. And so yeah, feel free to reach out to me, and I can see if I can help in whatever way.
So match the picture on the Pharmacy podcast to the Facebook page or the link.
Right. Yeah, that's the problem with having kind of a generic name is, and I almost need to reach out to the other Tim Baker out there and see if we can work out a situation, because I think he might go by Timothy more, and I go by Tim. I don't know.
Okay. Well, a couple of quick hit questions before we finish. You had the full military training at the highest level. What's your best daily ritual to keep your work on track?
Yeah, so I maybe not necessarily now, but I'm a runner and I like to work out. So I think for me, when I'm hitting my stride in my schedule, I'm doing those two things. And the other thing that I do is every night before I go to bed, I set my to-do list, and I use an app called Swipes that integrates with Evernote that kind of sets me up for the next day's work.
Oh, that's awesome. What about the best career advice you've ever received?
So it's funny. I was thinking of this when you've asked this to other guests, and for me, I've worked under going to West Point and being in the Army, and my path. I worked for so many great leaders, but the best advice was actually some home cooking, and it came from my two siblings, kind of independently when I was kind of going through that quarter life crisis and trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and they both kind of pointed me in the direction of financial planner because they thought that. Their advice was be true to yourself. You're an educator and you can help people and not make them feel, weird or uneasy about their financial situation. So yeah, be true to yourself.
And then what inspires you?
I would say my peers. I look out, there's a lot of young financial planners out there, and I'm thinking specifically through the XY Planning Network that are doing some great things in this space. And it really is an inspiration for me to get out there and provide the best service I can to my niche of clients.
Well, Tim, I really appreciate you being on the Pharmacy Podcast.
Thanks, Tony.
Support for this episode comes from the audiobook Memorizing Pharmacology, a relaxed approach. With over 9,000 sales in the United States, United Kingdom, and Australia, it's the go-to resource to ease the pharmacology challenge. Available on Audible, iTunes, and Amazon.com, in print, ebook, and audiobook. Thank you for listening to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. Be sure to share the show with the hashtag #PharmacyLeaders.